there was a lot of stress. There was really a lot of anxiety. I think that was uncontrolled. I can talk about it now, being 4 years away from it, being healed, having done a lot of both therapy and coaching and all of that stuff. I was just surrounded with all the right sort of tools and fertilizer. And of course, I did the work and I said yes. But I do think that it was a huge catalyst to make my post-pandemic life exactly what it can be for this season of life already.
Hey there, besties. Welcome to our cozy corner of the podcasting world. Thank you for pressing play and spending some time with me here on Share a Latte. I'm Sukree, your virtual coffee bestie, podcast orchestrator, master storyteller, and your caffeinated host. Picture us in a cozy cafe with the rich scent of freshly brewed coffee as we embark on a journey filled with inspiration. In each episode, remarkable women share their tales of overcoming life's hurdles, offering a comforting embrace for your spirit. These narratives serve as a reminder that resilience and unwavering determination pave the way to success. Join me each week for conversations that will stir your mind, warm your heart, and you'll unearthly own your own ability to transform challenges into remarkable strengths. The Share a Latte podcast sprinkles hope, courage, and the belief that you can not only handle life, but thrive throughout your day. All right, besties, let's embrace those tales of triumphs and get ready for another episode of Share a Latte. Hey there, latte and podcast lovers. Welcome to another episode of Share a Latte, where we sip coffee and indulge in inspiring conversations that fuel our spirits. Today, I have Dr. Judith Borger, who shares her journey with me, Min, your caffeinated host, and she navigates the journey of a pandemic-induced burnout, transforming challenges into opportunities for growth. As we sip our lattes, we explore the aromatic nuances of her experience from being an ER physician to successfully running a MediSpa and coaching high-achieving women. It's like your favorite cup of coffee, bold, rich, and filled with layers of resilience and passion. Through Dr. Judith's story, we'll uncover the transformative power of coaching, envisioning each step towards authenticity and fulfillment. Just like the perfect cup of coffee, Dr. Borger's journey is a harmonious blend of determination, passion, and the pursuit of infinite possibilities. So grab your favorite latte, settle in, and let's share a cup of inspiration with Dr. Judith Borger in today's episode. Welcome back, friends. I'm so excited to have Judith on. And Judith was actually an ER doctor during the pandemic. And as we're coming up to 4 years post-pandemic, let's talk a little bit about the burnout that happened for many of our healthcare workers. As Judith, you were like an ER doctor during this time, were you not?
I still am an ER doctor, but yes, I was an ER doctor during the pandemic, and it was quite an interesting sort of situation that I love the opportunity to share about that, because you're absolutely right. Burnout in healthcare, unfortunately, is rampant. And I think the pandemic really intensified a lot of that.
Yeah. So I don't know how it is down in the States, but we're always hearing up here in Canada that we are on the brink of a healthcare crisis. And the pandemic really brought our healthcare system to its knees. How was it down there for you guys? What was it like in the ER in the early days? Wait, you had just come back from mat leave. Let's go back, right? Because when did you come back from mat leave?
For me, it really compounded because I had my third child in December before the pandemic. So I was really just coming back to work as the wave of the pandemic hit North Carolina, where I was at. And I think the biggest thing that sort of initially really happened was a sense of fear. It was a scary time just because initially we did not know what we know now about transmission and protection and things like that. I think physicians, we of course, and I can only speak for myself, I felt a duty to my patients and to the community to do the best that we can. But at the same time, at the time, it did feel like we were putting ourselves also at tremendous risk, because we all had these waves of early COVID where unfortunately everybody or almost everybody who ended up on a ventilator or in the ICU ended up dying. And we knew so little about the transmission that really protecting ourselves and not knowing what we're going to bring home. And especially I was trying to nurse and pump and breastfeed and taking care of my patients and taking care of my family. I think especially the early stages were a pretty scary time.
Absolutely. So had you returned back to work like as the pandemic was like when the world was shutting down, or did you return before the world was shut down?
So I returned right around that time. So it was really like where I was, the world shut down in March and I returned the end of March. So it was really like it hit, it intensified. I think initially, of course, there were all the reports of it being in other countries and what's really happening. And then it was the beginning of March. I was actually lecturing in Seattle. It's another fun fact. The day that the first cases were diagnosed in Seattle, and I remember this like wave of fear like descending upon the city because it was the first time that it was now not in a land, but it had there was this outbreak of 11 or so people in a nursing home in Seattle. And I touched down in Seattle to lecture the day that happened. It was a very eerie feeling going out in the city. And then, of course, COVID spread across the US and the world. And I did come back right as it was really intensifying and picking up. And I remember intubating my first patient with COVID. And unfortunately, like so many, he died. And with intubation, despite mask and stuff, we're very close to patient's airway. And it was always told that was the biggest risk. And it was sad for patients too, because that patient I will never forget, because he was just the first that intubated that died from COVID. And even he knew, he was like the loveliest old guy. And he was like, I think I have the virus. I'm going to die. And I was just like, you do have the virus. And of course I didn't say you're going to die, but he ended up dying. And so it was just, I think we're so removed from it. And the strains that we have now are so much milder that I think it's important. And I love that you're opening up this conversation to really highlight what it was during that time.
So let's reflect a little bit on the time of you working during the pandemic. What were the pivotal moments? Like you just touched on one of them, but what were the other pivotal moments that really took a toll on your well-being? And how did this create a new sense of self? I couldn't imagine walking out of the pandemic being the same person who walked into it.
Yeah, that is such a good question. I think one of the pivotal moments was really, as I said, intubating my first patient with COVID, because that we had admitted some, and then sometimes they got sicker over the next days. And then, but this guy I intubated in the ER, and he got this foreshadowing, and he was such a nice older guy, like, right? I think for me, the next pivotal moment was really also that I had the chance to be part of COVID vaccine research. So I actually was a local PI. That's a principal investigator for Moderna and Novavax trials. And I worked on a bunch of big trials, including Regeneron, which is, I think, most famous for being the COVID drug that Trump got when he got COVID. And again, I think too, at that time, it was really just the desire to help the world. And so many other researchers were actually afraid to do COVID research because it would mean you would have to be in contact with COVID patients. Right. And I was already in contact with COVID patients. So I was like, yeah, I'll do this also. And so that was a pivotal moment. I have a MediSpa. I had to, of course, shut it down for, 6 months or something. And then, of course, I think the next pivotal moment for us was really the fact that there was a vaccine. Because again, this is not meant to be a discussion on vaccines, but I think we can all agree that just the fact that there was a vaccine at a time where COVID was very deadly gave people a new sense of hope. And especially because of course I was like the local face of it. I got vaccinated on TV, and I was there when we first allowed. So initially it was only like elderly people at high risk. Like we had waves here as to where we're going to get the vaccine. And especially hearing the stories from some of the older people that were like, oh, I haven't seen my grandkids now in a year. I haven't seen my friends at church. I haven't been able to with whatever time I have left to do all those things that bring me joy, because I've just been in my house afraid. And now there's this hope that maybe I'll get to meet my youngest grandkid that I've never met. So I think for me, that was another really pivotal moment in terms of that. There was a vaccine and it was not going to just go on with all of isolation.
What was it like in regards to, was there a lot of overtime? Were you, I don't want to say forced, but were you requested to put in a lot more overtime? Because there's already a doctor shortage. I don't know how it is down there, but up here we have there's a doctor shortage globally, I feel like. I couldn't imagine being an ER doctor and then having a doctor shortage in general. Were you asked to do overtime?
I think, again, as physicians, it does take a certain person, right? And we do spend more than a decade of our lives becoming physicians. Yeah. I do think that when we got asked to work extra, all of us did. So it wasn't like one of us had to work like millions and millions of hours. Because I think, at least in my group as a collective, we felt that it was our need to staff the ER. And then sometimes, even if there's a doctor shortage, there's nurses shortage and tech shortage and bed shortage. So it doesn't even always come down onto the doctor shortage. It's like the whole system is short. And in those early days, I think it really felt like we were all doing what we could. I think what was really hard, and you and I talked about this in the pre-interview, is when we're on wave like 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And we still have no hospital beds available, kids on ventilators that can't get beds, no hospital beds in the state. And then the rest of the world, though, is pretending like COVID is over. I think that another really hard part was, and there was some memes about it, is that everybody else is carrying on with their lives during their spring break, which again, I understand, because people just crave a sense of normalcy. And we want to get on with our lives and we want to live those moments, because I think COVID showed us that tomorrow is never guaranteed. But at the same time, sometimes there were still these, as like the Delta wave came and this other wave came, and suddenly there's a huge spike and suddenly all the hospital beds are full. And now there's this split where the people in the hospital are like, no, COVID's still a thing. And everybody else is on spring break being like, COVID's not a thing. So I think
I remember that.
Some of those moments, I think, contributed to certain burnout, maybe even more, because it was just at that point, it almost felt like sometimes there was this disconnect between some of our patients or some of the rest of the population who had spent the last year and a half from home pelotoning during their lunchtime, which again, I'm happy that people got to do that, being like, oh, COVID wasn't so bad. And then us being like, no, we're really, really tired of COVID.
You were looking for an end.
So please don't have your party with 800 people from different states and then wonder why everybody got COVID. And you know, it's so funny because there's certain people that still didn't believe it was real or thought we were lying when we were telling them they had COVID or their loved one had COVID. And or like that 2 years later would still be like, COVID, how did I get that? And I want to be like, where have you been?
I feel like if you had to have been living under a rock during those 2 years if you weren't really immersed in just seeing it. Like, I know that on social media we were seeing, especially in New York City, we were seeing trucks, like freezer trucks, and bodies being put into the freezer trucks because they didn't have room at the corners. They didn't have room at the hospitals to store them. There was just no room. So they were stacking up people. Was that happening in your state and at your hospital?
I don't know that we had to get to freezer trucks, but then to be honest, I think some of the thing about New York is that it was so public. I am honest that I have to be honest, I don't think that I ever asked the question whether we did or not. And if we parked them in the back and not the front. But I know we had like tons and tons of extra tents and treatment tents. And we definitely had makeshift things. And I don't know that it was quite as visible where I was. And it's a great question that I'm going to be honest, I never asked because I'm sure our wards got overwhelmed. Like some logistics took care of some logistics and it was not as visible.
You had a newborn at home too. Like basically a newborn. It was only a few months old, but by the time that you'd return back to work, how scary was that for you to go home every night?
Yeah, it was super scary. And that was the other thing I think that people don't talk about is that we used to do these crazy precautions, right? That of course were necessary. Again, now we know so much more that we know what would have been necessary. But as I said, at that time, we did not quite understand transmission pattern. We didn't understand susceptibility. We didn't know how to protect or not protect ourselves. So yeah, especially I was saying I was pumping the amount of sterilizing of things I did. And we used to all like strip in our garages and wash all those clothes on hot separate, but already have changed in the hospital one time before and then be on the second change of clothes and then do this extravagant like extra shower and like kind of running naked from the like garage. So it was very scary. Now I can say it with a bit of humor because I think sometimes you just look back and you're like, wow, that was really crazy. But yeah, especially as a breastfeeding mom, like the last thing I wanted to do was expose my child. But then at the same time, I also wanted to give my child as a physician all the antibodies from breast milk. And I even breastfeeding. So I did it, but I do know other people that made other choices because they were too worried about transmission.
Yeah, absolutely. Was it difficult? Did you have to isolate yourself like when you came home a little bit from your children what precautions were you taking?
As I said, I really just took the precautions of as I said, I had an extra set of scrubs in the hospital that I would bag up, right? And then drop them right into the washing machine. And then I would strip in my garage and bag that stuff up. And it would go also right in the washing machine. And then I would do this elaborate, almost like wound dairy cleanser thing that we would do for like the OR. But then after that, I would hug and kiss and whatever my children. I know some people that really isolated from their children, sent their children away. I did not do that.
Right, of course.
Needed my children needed me. And again, I think sometimes that is also where like your specific threshold probably comes in of what, again, with the lack of information, how you interpret it.
Yeah, exactly. You said you were running like a MediSpa. So had the MediSpa like at this point turned profitable and you were ready to, how did this affect the MediSpa business?
I had to temporarily close it down. And again, being a physician and being an ER physician, I took the guidance very seriously. And really the guidance was no non-essential things should be happening. I mean, if we don't even have elective surgeries happening, obviously, in my opinion, I do know that there are some people that made a different decision, but we followed guidance and we closed down. As I was at the time, I was smaller than I was now. I had several employees and honestly, I did the vaccine work. And one of the things I'm really most proud of was that even with all that unknown, I called all of my employees and I said, hey, listen, we're going to have to close down, but I'm going to pay you.
Thanks of you.
Stay home, take care of your kids. We redesigned some brochures or whatever. But I told them, I was like, listen, I don't know how long I can pay you, but for the next 3, 6, 9 months, I know I can pay you. And so as an employer, and especially as a female employer, because even to this day, I have an all-female staff and they're all moms, is one of the things I'm proudest of is that as an employer, I could tell my employees, hey, listen, you don't have to worry about your job. You don't have to worry about employment. Like just stay home, take care of yourselves. And if I asked you to do a little project here and there, just do it. But other than that, you're going to get paid. And so I think karmically it all comes back to us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's us thriving. And as we talk about being multifaceted women, one of my biggest, I think, things even now that I'm proud of is that with all the burnout that happens in healthcare and so many people like feeling like they're a number and a commodity and the system doesn't care about them, is that in my businesses, I really highly value my employees and really strive to be exactly the employer that I want to be. And after that was over, we took a hit that year, of course we did. And then we bounced back better than we ever have. And it's been growing ever since. So
I love that there was a bounce back that happened. That's truly amazing. Was there ever a point in the pandemic that you like had gotten so burnt out, you were like, that's it, I'm done. Like, I'm ready to leave being an ER doctor and just leave the medical industry behind?
I definitely had some low points, and it's really where I found coaching, right? There was definitely points that I had passive suicidality, and I've talked about that on other podcasts. And there was a lot of stress. There was really a lot of anxiety. I think that was uncontrolled. I can talk about it now, being 4 years away from it, being healed, having done a lot of both therapy and coaching and all of that stuff. But I think with all my children, I did suffer from some postpartum anxiety. And I think that whole fear-provoking thing of COVID really made that terrible. And I did, at my lowest point, I did get to passive suicidality, thinking the world would be better without me, my kids would be better without me. And I do think that the combination of all of the modalities. I'm a coach and I'm a physician, so I do understand that all of this happens the best synergistically. For me, it was really the combination of saying, yes, maybe I need some medication. Yes, I have a psychiatrist that I'm getting in therapy and treatment with. And yes, I am investing in myself and I'm investing in coaching. That really has opened my life. And I think some of it also, sometimes I think feels like when you're stuck, right? And there's no other way out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're helping women do that now through your coaching, right? Let's talk a little bit about that, because that sounds exciting.
Yes. So as part of my entire journey, I don't know if Martha Beck is, but I'm a Martha Beck Wayfinder trained coach. And I help others, a lot of higher achieving women, a lot of business owners really reorient their life to something they want it to be. Because as I talked about, so many times when we feel like despair, I think it's because of a lack of choice, right? And we don't realize that we can always choose certain things. We can always choose our thoughts. We can always choose our plans. And most of us have a tremendous amount of choice and agency, and we're not powerless, even though sometimes it feels like we are. And then also helping them make changes little by little that they desire. As a coach, we don't tell anybody what to do. We really just explore what your highest self, your truest self wants. And then the way I always start explaining it to people, it's if you had a map that you drew from here to somewhere far away, which is your life, even if you change course by 1 degree and 1 degree again, which might be really tiny changes over the course of time and over the course of distance, you end up in a completely different path. Unless you like want to burn the house down, which I don't recommend, and you want to change your job. A lot of times what people I think don't realize before coaching or mindset work is really how little changes can have huge effects.
Did you build some of this off of the burnout and the life that you led during the pandemic? Was it some of that coaching like derivative from that?
I started coaching much later because I really believe that, as I said, I needed to heal myself fully. And I do think, though, having been through true burnout, probably on more than one occasion, the one before time came with integrating a second kid and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I do think it makes me obviously interested in helping others with it because I know what it feels like and I know how bad it feels. And I also know that you can come out of it. So I think a lot of times we take our own experiences, right? And we use to turn around. But I'm going to be also honest that I don't believe that as soon as I'm out of the pandemic, I was ready to coach people, because I had to do my own work of healing and I had to do my own work of also learning how to be a great coach to effectively coach other people.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does it look like now for your clients? What are you helping them like work through, and where are they coming out of on the other end?
Yeah, so it's really individual. I, at this time, do one-on-one coaching. As I said, a typical story, I do think is somebody, I call it a lot like a midlife realignment. I think women come to me in midlife when they go, wow, I've built this life that everybody has told me I should do, gone to the school I should go, gone to the...
Marry the guy, have the 2.5 kids, the white picket fence, and the beautiful SUVs in the driveway, but my life feels a little empty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm feeling that. I know exactly what we're talking about. Yes, go on.
Yeah, so if that's a common theme, especially with women, and then because I think, again, there's that social conditioning and where we've been told what we should do to be happy, and then we get it all and we don't feel happy, and there's this huge disconnect. So I think a lot of times when people come to me, it's one of the reasons it's for this midlife realignment, and we really first work on getting them back to themselves in connection with what do you love, what do you want, and really clarifying what their goals and their values are and how they want to spend their energy and how they want to spend their time and how they want to think about things. And it's interesting because for me, like my whole life feels different, yet I essentially still have part of the same job. I still have the same husband. I still have the same kids. I still have the same house. But it feels so different. Yes, a lot of things have changed, but you don't have to blow it all up for it to feel different. And then the other times, obviously, women come to me is if they want to become entrepreneurs, or they're like, what else is out there? Or they want to follow a passion and they're like, I want to talk to somebody who's followed a passion. And a lot of it is just encouragement that if something draws you and lights you up, do more of that.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. What other like unique challenges are you finding that these women are encountering, and how are you tailoring your approach to getting them to find that success or their definition of success?
Yes, I think, again, I really believe that your own highest, wisest self knows. And I do work with all of the gifts that I have, and I'm very intuitive, and I see myself as a healer to help bring that out. But really, life is so full of infinite possibilities that I'm always blown away by the inner wisdom, creativity, and the ideas that my clients come up with. If we just open up those channels and we open up the portals and we let our mind and our lives be our fullest selves. So really themes that come up a lot. And again, these are just themes, are really how to balance it all. There's a lot of work on worthiness, because a lot of at some point also we're told that we're to this or we're to that, or we're not enough this or we're not enough that. With women physicians, a lot of us are overgivers, and we have issues with saying no and boundaries. And again, it's a worthiness thing. And some people don't feel like they're not worthy to receive unless they've worked really hard for it. So sometimes even in business, there's people that have like success saboteurs where they're just like, but this just feels so easy. Like no matter, and you're like, well, it might just be your zone of genius. And then as they expand through business, like I work with allowing people as they come up to their edge to expand that capacity to grow.
Oh, I love this. Love that. You're obviously still an ER doctor. What does the ER look like now post-pandemic? As we're jumping around a little bit in this conversation, I get insights. I want to know what it's like now for you, because you sound like the world's busiest woman. You have a MediSpa, you're still an ER doctor, and you have a coaching business. And you're a mom. I'm going to make one life happen.
It is so funny because you know what, it is so funny. That is actually what my next podcast episode that I'm recording on is going to be about intentional time management. Because one of the things that I do is really not do anything I don't want to do, which means I outsource absolutely everything. And I don't actually care if people judge me for it. I don't go to the grocery store. I don't fold my own clothes. I don't clean my own house. I don't even clean my car. Okay? Because I spend the time that I want on things I want to do. I spend it either on work that fulfills me. And again, the nice thing about having multiple streams of income is that you can turn them up and turn them down. I just gave my notice to go per diem in the ER and just do it on the days that I want to, right? The same with my med spa. I've set it up as a business. So I'm only injecting 2 days a week, and then I hire 4 other injectors to do all the other days. It doesn't have to be me. And then I coach a couple days a week because that is what I want to do with my time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the times that are for my children are the times that are for my children.
Right.
And that's the other thing that's really important. So I think about, in order to get to that point, I'm really clear on what my priorities are in this season of life. And that's another concept I think I would love to share, is like seasons of life.
Definitely share it.
I am very comfortable in what I want my priority to be in this season of life. And I have no problem saying no. I say no all the time, because really a lot of times when we say a yes to something is always a no to something else. So sometimes we're afraid to say no, but then we're really saying no to time with our children, time for our spouses, time for ourselves. So the ER post-pandemic, going back to your original question, it feels chill. The thing about it is it feels very chill. And again, I'm very part-time now in the ER. I do ER work still because I love the work of it. And I'm very clear on that. Having other sources of income, I do it because I love the work of it. And having realized that I actually love the work of it, when I show up, it's fun because I'm there to teach the residents, to connect with the patients, to selfishly get my enjoyment out of the work of it, and of course help people. And it does not feel so burnt out, but also because I have choice, and I have the choice at any point in time to walk away, right? And the fact that I'm going and I'm doing it is because I truly love my patients and I truly love the work of it.
Oh, I love this. How much did the pandemic feed into your now season?
Oh, I think it fed into it hugely. Yeah. It was a huge catalyst, I think. And I am truly blessed that through finding coaching and also having some really good friends that at my lowest I could call, who were like, no, I will get you in to see a psychiatrist on Tuesday. But my burnout could become a catalyst for a huge rebirth. I understand that not everybody is as blessed or as lucky, but I feel like I was just surrounded with all the right sort of tools and fertilizer. And of course, I did the work and I said yes. But I do think that it was a huge catalyst to make my post-pandemic life exactly what it can be for this season of life already.
Right. Oh, so what is this season of life looking like for you now, post-pandemic, and all your crazy adventures and entrepreneurial journey?
It feels fun and wide open. And I think I am really giving myself permission to redefine myself all the time. I think that is the other really fun thing, is that I think through multiple pivots and all of that stuff, I'm really seeing that it's okay to just be me. And I think that's really what it sounds like you have found that too, that it's okay to be you and you don't have to fit in a mold. And I totally know that when I first started my MediSpa business, there was I'm an academic physician with a lot of articles, and that there was totally people who were like, oh, you're going to go to Botox, blah, 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 blah. There's some people that have been like, I admire that you had the guts to start a business. I've had a million business ideas and I never started them. And I'm not saying that for I was right in the end, but I think that's the other thing. You have to, on that path to your truest self, the rewards are amazing, and you have to be able, people are going to talk regardless, right?
So true.
And I don't know your podcaster, if you ever heard that there was people that were like, oh, who are you to start a pod?
Are you kidding? I'm sure there's still people who are saying that.
Right?
Yeah. Cutting out the noise that is the hardest part of that journey I think for anybody. The minute that you decide that you're going to do something that off the beaten path or something that nobody else is doing, you either hear you hear both. You hear a lot of crickets from the people that you think would have been the loudest, or you hear a lot of feedback as to, you don't know, who are you to talk or do this. Yeah.
Yeah, and think especially like that non-traditional entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
well, how are you going to do a podcast when you don't have a degree in journalism? Well,
Yeah.
it turns out you don't actually need a degree in journalism. Okay,
And I think
so
the core of podcasting, like from an interviewer's point of view, is that the minute you're curious, you then bring your audience who is also curious in. And that's what drives the beautiful conversations out of podcasting, right?
yes, absolutely.
That's amazing. So things are just going up this year, and you are going to have a banner year in all aspects of your life.
I'm planning on it. As I said, I'm planning to have lots of joy, lots of fun, lots of time with my kids, lots of all the things. And yes, like changing lives in all the ways. That's
Right.
the other thing, through coaching, through medicine, and maybe that is one of the things that kind of I always thought made it a little easier for me too, that being a physician, especially being a physician through the pandemic, I never had a doubt as to whether I was doing something good for society or not. Does that make sense? That I never had to question my professional worthiness.
Yeah.
So I could always know that I've done, in a way, great things for the world, even if it was only on a microscopic scale by being in service to others. And I think that has always been a really strong guiding force for me. So yes, this year's going to be amazing. MediSpa's growing, podcasts growing, coaching's growing. And I think the fun is really also to see what happens next. Like you said, that curiosity, I always love following people because I'm just like, I can't wait to see where you go. Like truly, what child grow up, and I don't mean this in a paternalistic way.
It's true.
I just see so much possibility in life for everybody, and my colleagues and my clients and just other humans, that, like you said, that curiosity, I'm almost like, I can't wait to see what you come up with next. This is going to be fabulous.
Oh, I love this, Judith. I really do. We're going to be watching to see what is next, but you are the true definition of a woman who is thriving through her burnout and her mental health struggles and just the struggle of the post-pandemic or even the pandemic. I don't think you're alone in believing that the pandemic took a mental health toll on. It wasn't just, obviously, I feel like I don't want to use these words, but they're going to come out, that you had the harder version of this being in the medical world.
There's no comparison suffering. Let me just first say this.
Right.
I very fully, like, the pandemic was isolating. The pandemic was hard on everybody, whether you were at home worried that you were going to lose your job, whether you were worried about your parents, your children, your own health. Like, there's no comparison suffering. Yeah. Like, I think the pandemic was hard on everybody.
Can you tell us or share with us a little bit of like the actions and the mindset shifts that changed for you to step into this more thriving portion and season of your life?
Yeah. So when I think there's so much, of course, I've changed so many things internally, but if this question is really about actionable tips, I think one of the things that I do with the two things that I would love to leave your listeners with is, the first thing is to really connect with your body, because so many times we walk around with this intellectual part and then there's the rest of us. And true, fulfilled, authentic living, I believe, is like an alignment of your body, your soul, your higher wisdom. Mm-hmm. So sometimes when somebody feels disconnected, or maybe not just connected, is I ask them to just like quiet themselves, feel the seat under them, feel the earth under them, and just breathe for a little bit, and then ask themselves, how do I feel? How do I truly feel? And just begin to check in. And then from that, it becomes a little bit of a game of hot and cold. Does this feel hot or expansive or warm? Like that game of hot and cold you played, warm, warmer, like where every action or big thing, does that feel expansive or warm in your body when you really check in? Or does that feel like contracting or cold? And no, and how many times do we override it? to really using the body as a guide and checking in so that your whole body is in alignment. Because I think that was definitely something that was different for me, is that I was a very cerebral being versus the reason I'm giving you this tip is because I was the one that was disconnected from my body. And I think especially in intellectual, I think a quote unquote intellectual and cerebral professions, we almost get trained to do that because in residence, we work like 100 something hours. We don't get to pee when we want to. We don't get to eat when we want to, like just override it all. So to really connect with your body. And then the second one goes to your thoughts, that your thoughts are also optional in the sense that we think that this little voice in our heads is the truth, but it's really narrative. And the fact that our thoughts control our feelings, control our actions is another thing that learning that blew my entire mind. And most of the time our thoughts are made up of the mean girl in high school, the critical aunt, and the boyfriend that dumped you. That's true.
Yeah.
Some of the things we say to ourselves in our brains are not the nicest at all. Yeah. It blew my mind when I really began to learn that a lot of those thoughts that were causing the suffering were actually completely optional, and that you could examine them, and by examining them being like, is this actually true? And a lot of that automatic programming that's running and these millions of thoughts are just like lies, and not good lies, not the lies that say I'm strong, I'm powerful, I'm worthy, but the lies that are very negative self-talk and very critical. So I think that's the other thing whenever people have those thoughts, is to actually even just recognizing that they're not the truth. They're not law. They're really just thoughts, and thoughts are purely optional, and thoughts are there to be questioned and examined.
Oh my goodness. You left us with some amazing nuggets in this episode. This is going to be a banner episode to round out the fact that we've been post-COVID for 4 years. But I think there was so much to learn out of this conversation. I'm sure that there's going to be lots of people who want to connect with you. So where can they find you?
Thank you for that opportunity. So first of all, I'm really active on Instagram. My Instagram is at Dr. Borger, DoctorBorger. That means doctors written out. I love DM me, comment, all of those things. I love interacting with people. And I think that's another thing that the COVID world has shown us, is that these virtual connections, just like you and I, are forming, like they're real and they're meaningful. And I think that's one of the most amazing things that come out of this pandemic, is that you do get a little bit of freedom of location if you want to chat with somebody, if you want to interview with somebody, if you want to coach with somebody. Like, you're not just limited to that 10-mile radius you're willing to drive. I have a website that's under www.theaestheticdoctor.com. I have a podcast called The Aesthetic Doctor Podcast, and that's really the best ways to find me. But I love meeting new people. I love being of service. So definitely would love to connect with anybody. And of course, I always hope that the conversation you and I have resonates and see them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Judith. This conversation was so beautiful. I loved it. Thank you. And to my guests, I hope that you guys got a lot out of this and enter the next season of your life with a little less burnout and still feeling as beautiful and glorious and living that true, authentic self that you're destined for. Thanks, guys. I hope that you're deeply moved by the inspiring journey of Dr. Judith Borger that has unfolded before us. Like a rich cup of coffee, her journey is layered with resilience, determination, and the invigorating essence of endless possibilities. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to Judith for sharing her wisdom, experience, and the aromatic blend of her inspiring story. As we raise our coffee mugs in appreciation, let's carry the spirit of authenticity, resilience, and the gratitude into our own lives. To you, my latte besties, burnout happens no matter what industry you're in, and it's what you learn from it and how you see it in the next season of your life. Like a perfectly brewed cup of coffee, our lives can be a blend of passion, purpose, and endless possibilities. I hope that this episode inspired you and you take bigger steps in creating that beautiful life that you've always wanted. If today's episode warmed your heart, please hit that subscribe button and stay with us for future journeys. If you enjoyed the chat today, your thoughts and feedback mean the world to me, and they'll help others discover the magic of Share a Latte. Each story enriches our journey. Remember, you can turn trials into triumphs and scars into stars. Keep believing and keep chasing those beautiful dreams. This is Min taking her last sip from the Share a Latte podcast, where life happens and coffee helps.